All right, welcome to class today. Starting right at 11:30. Let's see. The first thing that I want to do is make sure that we're all clear that next week we're gonna not meet in here. We will meet at 11:30. I mean, where I was thinking to meet at the van at 11:30. You guys know where the math zone is? Does everybody here know where the math zone is? Okay, behind the math zone, there's a parking lot, kind of in the loosest sense of the word parking lot. It's a dirt lot, gravel lot that has all the vehicles for our school parked behind it. Okay, so we'll take one of those. Now, I was going to check to see if the bigger van was available, and I forgot. But in any case, it would be great if a few people could get alternative transportation. It wouldn't be super critical because we're not actually going that far off campus. We don't have enough seats. I can make 2 trips to ferry everybody there, and even get some people started. But we're going to meet in that parking lot. Does everybody know where you need me to? I don't know where it is. You don't know where it is?
No, but I'll meet you there with my car.
In case there's extra people, that'd be awesome. And I'll make sure that I'm there a little bit early so that if anybody gives you trouble about loitering in that parking lot with your car, I can tell them that you're... All right, so here is our building. We're inside of it. That's me. So this place is the powerhouse. It's a restaurant now, and then this dirt lot right here. So if you came, either this way or this way, if you came down Montague, you just travel straight into it. You come right here, turn right. So meet in that parking lot at 11:30 instead of meeting here at 11:30. So the way that it'll go is that we'll divide. I'll have 4 drones for us to use that day. We're just going to use quadcopters that day. Later we'll fly some fixed wing aircraft. I have a fixed wing aircraft that I'm actually toying with getting it to work for next week, and we might try, but probably just the 4. So if all of you come, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think there's 10 enrolled in the class. Is somebody missing? Well, I guess her. Right. So if everybody comes, there'll be 10 people. And so if we divide up into little groups of 3, then we'll have so actually 2 groups of 3 and 2 groups of 4. Sorry, 2 groups of 3 and 2 groups of 2. Then I'll have enough for everybody to fly, and each one will have at least 2 or 3 batteries to fly around with. Okay? So everybody gets an opportunity to fly the drone. Now, all of these systems require that they actually don't require. It doesn't need to have a view of what the drone is seeing, what's called a first-person view. In other words, it's like you're a little mouse sitting in the drone. They don't all have to have a tablet connected to them or a phone, but it is pretty helpful, I think. And so I actually only have 3 devices that we can pair. So anybody that wants to can bring another device. It can be a phone or a tablet. You all could bring one. I'm sure we'll have one. Do you have a question? Well, it could be as big as you want. Eventually, it gets cumbersome. You have to hold it separate from the thing, or one of the observers will have to hold it. What's the biggest that'll mount to the controller? The biggest that'll mount to the controller is, I think, 7 inches or so. And it depends on the controller. So three of them will be these DJI Phantoms, 4s like this. 3 of the devices that we have will look like that. On the controller looks like this, so you can fit a pretty large object in that one. I think it's 7 to 9 inches. I'm not positive, but you can also use a phone. And in fact, this other one, so one of the groups will fly this little guy. This is a Mavic Pro, and I'll just leave this unfolded in the front of class. So this one folds up really small. Damage it. I'm not gonna put the battery in right now. But this guy flies around, and the controller, what I meant to show, sorry, is a lot smaller. So the controller here, the idea is that you fit the device you're trying to fit, and you kind of squeeze it in there. So if you squeeze it in there, the device is right here. So anyway, we may not have Wi-Fi out there. So if you want to try to use your own device, is the point I'm trying to get at, is that you'll, and I'm sure some of you will bring your own, but you need to download this DJI Go 4. So if you download that DJI Go 4 app, then you'll be able to use your own device if you want to. I'll have 3 devices, and then there'll be another device that we can plug into. And both of these devices, both of these drones, aerial systems we're going to be using, accept a typical USB in this end. You know, the same as the mouse. So like the mouses are down there, but you know the opposite end, or the keyboard. What's that? Okay, that's that end. So if you bring your own cable that has that end and plugs into whatever your phone has, it'll work. So if your phone's USB-C, you need the big, I don't know what they call that, the normal USB. Yeah, USB 2 or 3. It's just the, yeah, I think it actually is a USB-A. Yeah, maybe I could get a picture of it. You think it's called USB-A? It's the side that usually plugs into a charging port. Yeah, USB-A. Okay, great. So yeah. So the side here is the female end of this. Okay? So if you have a plug that looks like that, and then your plug right here just has to look like your phone. Whatever your phone has, or your device, you plug it into the other end. You'll be all set. Okay? So by the way, if you want to, this semester, if you want to check out a drone and fly it, this is the one that you'll to collect data for one of the projects is collect the data. So you can fly this, and we'll get familiar with how it operates. And there's videos actually online that you know, if you're still not comfortable after next week flying, you can figure that you can watch some more videos and make sure you're doing all of the stuff that you need to do, and if you want me to come along with you to fly whatever area you want to fly, we can schedule that as well. All right. So next week we'll go over this a little bit more. All of these quadcopter drones, even the ones that are super expensive and that are used by big agencies all over, use the same basic operation. So there's always 2 sticks on the controller. And the 2 sticks on the controller are how you control the drone itself, okay? The unmanned system itself. The left stick, there's a slide if you want to refer back to the slide later, if you want to go study it. The left stick, the up and down, makes the vehicle actually go up and down. So that's the easiest. Most of us are left-handed, but most of us are right-handed, but it's the left side that makes it go up and down. Okay, so we fly up and down, and then left and right. There are different setups in different countries, but most of the world now adopts this situation where the left and the right on the same controller make the vehicle do this. It's called changing the yaw. So in other words, this left stick won't make the vehicle do anything to change its XY position at all. The left stick doesn't change the XY position. Also, in normal mode, in the normal operating mode of this thing, if you make sure that it has a GPS connection before you take off, it also won't move if you just let go and hold it like this. So that's always a safe thing to do. All right, so this doesn't change the direction at all. Now this one, it does change the direction. In fact, it's all about changing direction. And if you only touch this stick, you will only change either the X or Y position of the aircraft. So if you push forward, it will always move forward. No matter what forward is, it will move that way. So in other words, the end with the camera will move forward if you press forward. Okay? If the forward's facing this way, it'll go this way. If it's an aircraft facing this way, it'll go this way. Forward and up at the same time. So that's a question some people have, is what if I press both sticks what if I do input two things at the same time? It'll do both. In fact, it's a great way to create a smooth shot, to get better and better at figuring out how to use both shots for videos I'm talking about. So yeah, if you hit up and to the left, it's going to go like this. It's going to stay in the same spot. It's going to be rotating around. It's going to be spinning around this way as it goes up. But if you also hit forward, it would be spinning around and kind of trending, but it would still spin, but it would be trending out in a wider and wider circle if you also press forward here. All right, so backwards here makes it go the opposite end of the direction that the camera is going, and then left and right on the right stick go like this. All right, and we'll discuss some other aspects next week. Most unmanned aerial systems, almost all of them, if they're really unmanned aerial systems nowadays, have a GPS on board. The GPS is in the vehicle; it's not in the controller. Some people forget that, right? So one of the basic operations that an unmanned aerial vehicle is called return to home. I'm putting home in quotes because what's the implication of no GPS being in this device?
And it returns to wherever it acquired GPS.
Yeah, it returns to the location that it started, or the location that it acquired GPS. If you take off without it ever acquiring GPS, it'll acquire GPS eventually because it'll get up, to a place where it can. You have to remember that is that when it returns back to where you are, you may not be there anymore. This happens to us a fair bit when we're on boats, right? We're on a boat, and you'd be surprised how even if you're keeping an eye on it, all of a sudden you'll be like, where'd it go? Because it's tiny. And if you're 2,000 meters away from where you took off, it can be really, really hard to see it. And also, you'd be surprised how hard it is to see a boat from the drone. So you could look in the first-person view and try to find where am I? If everything's blue, it's different. Now it's a little easier on land because sometimes you can recognize landmarks in the first-person view and get back pretty easily. So, yeah. And we'll talk about keeping an eye on things like the battery, how much longer you have. All the drones that we'll be flying next week, you'll have about 25 minutes, but you want to get back a little bit before that. And most UAS systems nowadays will alert you when your battery is getting close to draining. The other buttons on here are really about controlling the camera that's built into the system. This little red H, and the other controller has one too, is the return to home mode that I talked about before. Now, as far as finding missions for for mapping, we're gonna get into that a little bit more as the course progresses. We might fly one mapping mission at the end of our experiment next week, but that requires a totally different app or a series of apps. There's actually a ton of apps for mapping nowadays, even for the same ecosystem, because they've released programming interfaces so that different people can design different apps for slightly different purposes, or for maybe even the same purpose. But it's nice because it's competition for those developments. Anybody wants to come look at those? Probably after class you can. All right. So yeah. So yeah. Oh. Yeah. Let's see if sometimes I have to. Can you see me a little bit better?
Beautiful. Can you angle down? No, up. All right. Back towards you. There you go. Yeah, perfect.
All right. Great. Okay. So that should be all that we need for next week. In the event that it's actually like raining, then we'll meet here. Should look and see, because now we're in the 10-day weather, right? Let's see what it says for next week. Of course, it's always going to change. Ooh, so right now it does say showers. So in the event that it's raining, we'll flip the next 2 weeks. I'll send out an email. So look for an email on, probably I won't actually call it until Tuesday. So look for an email on Tuesday. If it is raining a lot, then we'll meet here and do the, yeah. Oh, well, I was like wondering why it was going to get so cold again. But those words apply no matter what, but it's great that that's not Hattiesburg. I don't know why it said on Washington, D.C. I hardly ever go to the weather site. Okay, so we're looking a lot better. Warmer, and, warmer, a little bit warmer. Today's pretty warm. It might be above 60. But in any case, it looks like we're doing good, but we're kind of straddling 2 shower days. So even if it's really, really overcast, we're still going to do it. We're still going to go out there and fly. So look for that. I'll tell you whether or not we're still going to go. So hopefully we'll be able to, and we'll be able to break up the lecture and the field days because we'll probably have more fun out there in the field. Okay. So today we're going to talk about basically the rules. So I want to talk a little bit about operation, which we just did, because we're going to fly. But the other things that we need to know are some of these rules in order to fly. Okay. And next week, remember I told you last week, I told you that technically even being a student in a class falls under these Part 107 rules. But next week we'll kind of be on the edge of that. Okay. At the end of it, so I've already said kind of how we're going to operate. We're going to have 4 drones flying, maybe at the same time. At the end of this, you guys can critique and see if we'll be, based on your knowledge, if we're breaking any rules for next week. All right? All right. So I had these PDFs up here last week, and they don't really have to do with the 107 rules per se, but they're kind of like, well, they are. They're discussions of the implications of being able to collect data using drones. And they go back a little bit even into just the implications of maps, right? Or remote sensing in general. We've been able to collect data from space now for well over a decade that some people might consider an invasion of privacy. Like from space, we can figure out, the size of my. I don't have a swimming pool, but if I did have a swimming pool, you could figure out the size of my swimming pool and other things like that. So, was there anything that anybody thought was interesting from reading these two articles? If you haven't read them yet, I would encourage you to do that. We can have a bit more of a discussion about that. Okay, so today what I'd like to do is go over this slideshow presentation, but it won't all be just the presentation. I'd like to show you a few other materials and even show you kind of some practice test questions that I have in an application that I purchased for flying for taking the exam. So I downloaded the lecture here. I'm just going to leave it like this. It's a little bit easier to add. I know it's cheesy. It says click to add subtitle, but all right. So one thing to be clear is everything we're going to be discussing today are the rules for flying an unmanned aerial system in the United States of America. If you fly an unmanned aerial system somewhere else besides the United States, there's going to be different rules. In some countries, like the Bahamas, for instance, I know a little bit about flying in the Caribbean because we go there. In some countries, it's highly restricted. Okay, you think, oh, the Bahamas is so close to the United States, maybe it's the same. Well, if they find a drone with you, they'll confiscate it, and you have to do all this paperwork. Whereas in other countries, it's still pretty lax. Like, oh well, the license in the U.S. is good here. They probably have some tourism office that thinks it's a good idea. I don't know exactly, but you should check if you're traveling overseas and you want to do mapping. You should definitely find out what the local rules are for flying. Okay. Also, everything that we're going to talk about today, we're going to divide it into two categories. Most of the time, we're going to talk about flying commercially. So I already defined that term a little bit, but that doesn't just mean that you're being directly paid for it. Okay? And we're going to start off talking about flying recreational, in other words, for fun. If you're considered a recreational user, you fly your drone for fun, as a hobby. Now, some people might say, hey, it's always fun, right? But that actually doesn't cut it with the government. You can't just say, well, it was fun, I was getting paid, but I was mostly doing it for fun. This is where you're truly just only exclusively doing it for recreational activities. So if you are flying for fun, you do still need to register your drone. So there was a period of time where this kind of went back and forth in the United States. So I forgot exactly when it happened, but over the last 5 years, there was a mandate that came down from the FAA that said everybody needs to register their drones. Then it was challenged in court and overturned, and then the FAA basically reworded their rules so that it didn't go afoul of the specific law that had been passed in Congress. The law that had been passed in Congress was from like the 50s or 60s. It was about recreational model aircraft. It said that it basically said that there wouldn't be any further rules pertaining to these particular things. And so they changed the verbiage a little bit. But if you're flying one of these unmanned aerial systems, even if you're flying over your backyard, as soon as you enter the airspace, which the FAA has defined as being off the ground, right? You might think of airspace as being up above some threshold, and there probably are still people that debate this, okay? But the FAA considers as soon as it leaves the ground as it being in the airspace. So even if you're flying in your backyard, if it weighs more than 0.55 pounds, which is like, well, it's a little over half a pound. So how much is that? Like 2 sticks of butter or something? I don't know. Is a stick of butter a half pound or, I mean, quarter pound? So 2 sticks of butter. If it weighs more than 2 sticks of butter, then you have to have it registered. Okay, so what that doesn't include are those little guys that you might buy at Walmart. They probably weigh less than that. All right, so this website right here is actually for registering drones, both commercial and for recreational purposes. If you register for recreational purposes, then you select fly model aircraft under Section 336. That's the recreational rule that they've established. And technically, you aren't registering the drone itself. You're registering yourself as a drone operator. And so you only have to register your drone or your UAS system once for recreational purposes. That's not commercial, that's recreational. So you register once on that website, and you attach the same number. The only other rule is that you attach that registration number to a place that can be seen. You can put it in the battery compartment. Here, I've attached it to the side of this vehicle using I got fancy and used my wife's vinyl thing. What, vinyl printer? But you could actually just write it. Some people put it in the battery compartment. The only rule is that it can't be somewhere where it takes a tool to get to. So the battery clicks in and clicks out. So that's okay to put it in here. But it has to be someplace where you can get to it and it's readable. Also, you do have to be 13 years old to register. If you're under 13, a responsible adult has to be able to register. You also have to pay with a credit card. So you have to have a credit card. I don't know how many 14-year-olds have credit cards, but you do have to be able to pay. It lasts for 3 years. It's $5 for any, like if you own 100 unmanned aerial vehicles, if you own 100 drones, you're fine with the recreational. Just register once and you put the same number on all of your drones. Okay. All right, so that's how you register your drone. Then you have to follow this set of rules. And there are some people out there that debate whether or not what the binding, are these actual laws and you get thrown in jail. There have been people that have been fined, though, for disobeying these rules. Okay? And people who have actually paid their fines settled. Usually involves a court case. We don't know all the details. So it's important to review these rules for your drone. Lots of people get found out violating rules, actually, from posting their, well, hey, look what I did with the drone, online. So don't do that. Don't post about breaking a rule. So it'll fly only for fun or for recreation. Sometimes this is an area where people have actually been fined. People that have used their drone for fun or for recreation and posted their videos that are very interesting, very desirable. They generate content on the web. And they get into a position where if they post it to a place like YouTube that pays for content, then eventually their content that they get paid for They get paid by YouTube for their content, and eventually that is considered a commercial operation. Okay? And so there have been people fined by the FAA for posting their videos. Now, I'm probably never, I don't have my own YouTube channel that's generating revenue for myself. I do have a YouTube channel just to post my videos, but it's not generating any revenue. You know, you have to get a lot of views to do that. But if you're in that position, think about that, and you could end up in a gray area. So it'd be best to actually have a license for that. Okay? You have a policy? Yeah. You have a question?
Yeah, do you know if there's an option though on YouTube where you can you choose not to monetize your video in that instance?
Probably. I'm not an expert on the YouTube. Yeah. I just said the YouTube. It'd be too. I was about to say the YouTube, the monetization part. The internet. Yeah. All right. Okay. One of the things I say here is to follow the safety guidelines of the Model Aircraft Association. Okay. A model aircraft community-based organization. There is a model aircraft association out there that publishes rules. Most of the rules are listed here that most of these organizations have. So I should have put a link to this, but I'll just type it in. American Model Aircraft Association. Okay, model aeronautics. Got it a little bit wrong. So the AMA existed a long time before what we thought of as drones, back when people were flying gas-powered airplanes. But it's still an organization that you can join, and they actually do provide some level of insurance, as long as you're flying for recreational purposes only. So that's a and they do have dues, and they use those dues to basically mostly to further the legislation about model aircrafts. All right, so their rules and the rules that the federal government also recommends kind of go along with those. One of these is to fly at or below 400 feet within uncontrolled airspace. We'll talk about what airspace means, but you can't fly near an airport is basically what it boils down to. But in order to study for the test, the 107 test, you need to know a few more details there. Okay? So 400 feet is how high you can fly recreationally. So fly within a visual line of sight. That means that you can see it with your own eyes without with your own eyes with just contacts or glasses. So contacts and glasses are okay, but without binoculars. Make sure you can see the drone at all times. Now, what does it mean to see the drone? Right? I mean, I think that's a little bit of a gray area there. You can see a little black speck floating around, but could you realistically control that black speck if it's only a black speck? Because you need to know which way is forward, backward, left, and right, right? With the boat drone, we lost control of it for a second. This is the one that goes on the surface, so it doesn't really fly in here. But it was impossible for us to tell which way it was facing because it was so far out, and eventually we lost control with it. So you do need to feel comfortable being able to control it. Okay. Never fly near other aircraft. By the way, they consider this aircraft. So if you're flying with somebody else, you need to have a way to communicate. Hey, I'm going to be on this area, you're going to be in that area, and we won't crash. But it's really important that you never fly near actual manned aircraft. All right, there's a rule that says that you're never to fly over groups of people. Now this says groups of people, and sometimes people, when they're flying recreationally, interpret that to mean that, if I fly over an individual or two, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're flying commercially, the rule is explicit. We'll talk about that in a second. That you do not fly over people that are not participating in the operation. So it's no people. So remember that for the test. All right, public events. I was downtown in Hattiesburg a couple years back, watching Eagle Palooza or something, and there was a drone flying right over the people. Okay, that's not technically okay unless they obtained a waiver, which I don't know. Okay, stadiums full of people. It's a big no-no to fly over a stadium an hour before or an hour after. You could get in big trouble for that. That's one of the big rules. Stadiums an hour before or an hour after a stadium that holds more than 10,000 people. All right, obviously never fly over emergency response efforts. Lots of times it'd be great, hey, I thought it would have been really cool to fly over the tornado that happened that came right by my house, tore off part of my roof. The one that happened in Hattiesburg, I guess it would be almost 2 years ago. But technically, you're not supposed to do that. I did fly like 10 days later. I flew over it. All right, if you want to fly more advanced drone operations, then review Part 107 and fly under that. Part 107 is the commercial rules that we'll talk about here later today. All right, so with with the recreational rules, here are some general places where it's not safe to fly. You cannot fly in these places. It is illegal to actually fly a drone in and around Washington, D.C. It's just a no-fly zone. So you can't bring your drone to go see, to fly down the mall. It's just totally illegal. You'll get in trouble. Also, all national parks and even some local parks have set up rules. Now, technically, a national park isn't the FAA. Neither are local regulations. So, for example, my dad lives in Laguna Beach, California. I went there for Christmas, and the beach zone is part of the city, and they've designated that no drone zone. You cannot travel there. I mean, you can't fly a drone there. Technically, since they don't have the jurisdiction to control the airspace, it's actually takeoff and landing, which is illegal in those areas. So for national parks and for these local, like if a local municipality says this is a no drone zone, if you can safely fly away and follow all the other regulations, you might still get in an argument with a local person, but you wouldn't get prosecuted. So there are people who do this in Laguna Beach. They fly from up higher. They're probably still breaking the rules of flying over people because there's lots of people on the beach. So that's not necessarily a good example. But in a national park area, you could do it if you wanted to fly into the edge of a national park. You could, as long as you were following all the other rules. Because what they're enforcing is the ability to take off and land from those areas. Now these other ones, emergency rescue operations I already mentioned, restricted or special use airspace, security insensitive near airports. They're all similar rules in the commercial realm. So we'll talk about those in a second. The federal government has an app that you can download to your phone for recreational flying called Before You Fly mobile app. And there's also another one. I'll show you this. So Before You Fly is a little bit clunky. There's another one called Air Map. I have a link to it at the end of the lecture. I'll show it right now. So Air Map, it's not necessarily authoritative, but it's pretty good. And this won't help you in studying for Part 107 or anything. For that, you actually need to be able to read a proper sectional chart. All right, so here's the air map. Let's zoom into our area. Hattiesburg. Okay, so it's helpful to understand what they're doing, and the Before You Fly does a very similar type of operation. So one of these layers is called the air map layer. This is kind of like warnings to look for, things to look out for. If you actually turn off that layer, let's turn on the Fly for Fun. Okay. So here's Fly for Fun. So these are areas that you cannot fly. You can't fly for fun. Basically, in areas that are within 1 mile of any airfield, or I think it's 3 miles. 3 miles of any airfield, you can't fly. Also, you can't fly in any restricted airspace. So these areas have a tower. These areas do not have a tower, but they have an airfield. Okay, so there's the Bobby Chain Airport. This is an airport associated with Camp Shelby. This is another airport. But none of these have a tower associated with them. So you just don't get too close to them if you're trying to fly for fun. Okay, this is Pine Belt Laurel Regional Airport. So you can't even get inside of this area because that's restricted airspace. Fly inside that circle. But you can fly in other places as long as you're following other rules. Okay, so in other words, you're not more than 400 feet. I'm going to change it to this guy. We're going to fly next week in this area right here. Notice that we're getting kind of close to this airspace, but we're not in it, and that's what's important. So as long as we stay 400 feet above the ground, within 400 feet of the ground, we're not going to interfere with any air traffic, even though we're close. Because the air traffic shouldn't drop down below 1,000 feet until they get into that area. That's the rules that they're operating under. Now, if we were Part 107, which is what we'll talk about in a second, if we've got our license to operate commercially, then each of these little squares actually has a specific floor to the airspace associated with it. So in other words, if you're in this square right here, the floor is 200 feet. You can actually fly up to 200 feet if you're in that square. You can fly up to 100 feet if you're in that square. But it goes all the way to the ground there in that. But in any case, if you're within the controlled air, when you're flying into the controlled airspace, you should notify the tower that controls that airspace. And we'll talk about that because there's different ways to do that now. Talk about that in a second. All right. So those are the general rules if you're just flying for fun. Those are good to learn. But what we want to focus on now is this Part 107. So once you pass your Part 107, they mail you. You have to pass it and apply online, which basically I think they just do a very light security check on you. Basically, would it be okay for you to get on an airplane? Not like they don't like interview your relative. But anyway, they mail you a little card. It looks like that. So this is. And they actually refer to this as a remote pilot license. So they call it a pilot license. It's not the same as flying in an airplane. But a lot of the knowledge that you have to learn, or piloting an airplane, a lot of the knowledge you have to learn about reading sectional charts does come from similar questions. In fact, one of the things that we'll talk about today is this when you sit down to take the test, you'll actually have this. I put a link to this in the lecture. But they give you a copy of this when you take the test. Okay? There's too much in here to really make this useful if you've never looked at it before. So it's very useful to look at this before you sit down. Now there's some stuff in here that won't be on the test. Notice it said testing supplement for sport pilot. That's a type of manned aircraft pilot. Recreational pilot and remote pilot. And private pilot. Okay? You're studying for a remote pilot. There is some stuff in here that's not applicable for remote pilots, but there's a lot that you think, oh, why do I need to know that? But you do have to know it. So one of those things is learning about airspace and being able to read what's called a sectional chart. You don't need to be able to read everything on a sectional chart, but you do need to be able to identify certain airspaces and then be comfortable with reading the legend to identify other things. So there's a legend. I should have marked the page, but there's a legend for the section. Oh, here it is. Okay, sectional aeronautical chart legend. And so I'll just pull this up here in a second. But you can see things like become familiar with different types of special airspace. And obstacles, like tall obstacles. Obstacles are actually kind of besides you don't want to crash into them, but they're kind of a benefit to unmanned aerial pilots because they extend the ability for you to fly up further. Because you can go 400 feet above any obstacle, whereas a manned airplane cannot fly cannot fly within 1,000 feet of anything on structure on the land. So there's that little buffer. You get to fly within 400 feet of it. They can't fly within 1,000, or they're not supposed to fly within 1,000 without special authorization. Okay. So it's called the Remote Pilot Certificate. That's what it's called. That little card is what's called the certificate. And so it's actually, it's fairly easy to pass. You got to pass it. So it's called the Remote Pilot Certificate with a small UAS rating. And if you're getting paid to fly your drones, you need it. And if what does commercially mean? In a way that is concerned with buying, selling, or making a profit. Not only includes being paid directly, but any activity that's in furtherance of a commercial activity, whether or not for you or for another party. So in other words, if somebody says, hey, can you fly, can you go and take a picture of my business or my house that I'm trying to sell? Technically, probably not going to get in trouble for it, but technically that is, and you could get in trouble for it. So if you take a picture of somebody that's trying to sell their house, even if you give it to them for free, if they post it on a website and they're like, hey, look at my house, I'm trying to sell it, that is not legal. Okay? Or if you're promoting anything, if that thing is for sale, that's not legal. You should have a Part 107 license to fly, to do that. All right, so here are the requirements. Unlike the other one, you have to be 16 years old to fly. So anybody that's 16 years or older can become a pilot. You have to speak English. You've got to be in a physical and mental condition to safely fly a drone. Unlike a regular pilot, commercial airline pilot, they have to be checked out by a doctor. So you're the one that makes the call. I'm sure if they investigated, they could say, well, this is a rule, and obviously you didn't meet that criteria. But you do not have to go be checked out to meet this criteria. And finally, the biggest one is you have to pass this knowledge exam. Okay? So you do need to carry your certificate with you. And the certificate is actually, there's no expiration date put on the certificate. But you do have to be current. You have to maintain what's called currency. So every 2 years, you have to either retake the exam, or there's a shorter exam that you can take that will also certify you to continue. So for every 2 years, it costs you another $150. I think that's on the next slide. Yep. So it's $150. Even the shorter exam is $150. I'm like, what? It's a shorter exam. Why can't it be cheaper? So it's only to benefit you. So what you have to do is you have to schedule an appointment with a knowledge testing center. And I'm sure that in areas outside of where we live, they're like everywhere, but they're not here. So the closest places to Hattiesburg are either the New Orleans area, Mobile area, or Meridian. So I would guess on the coast, the closest places to you would be the New Orleans area, or Mobile. So there's not. You think there'd be one in Jackson? There's not. You might think there'd be one on the coast. There's not. So those are the only places you can go. I put a link to where you would go if you wanted to take the exam. You call them up, which you could do it online. You know, this is the 20th century, or the 21st century. You have to call them up and actually talk to a human being to schedule a test. All right. So once you pass the test, and one thing that if you actually click this, there are other places for you to take different tests. This company administers lots of different federal tests. And so you might think, oh, Dr. Raber was wrong. Maybe they do add other ones, but say, George, he was wrong. There's one in Jackson. There's one somewhere else. Okay, at least as of 4 or 5 weeks ago when I checked, there were when you call them, they'll be like, oh yeah, well that test isn't available at that location. That's for being a truck driver inspector or something. So there's lots of these places, and they'll all be listed out. But in terms of the ones that will allow you to get the SUAS test, those are the closest ones from my experience. All right, so once you pass the test, then you will you'll go online. It's called this IACRA place. You'll take the document that they give you. It'll have a special number. You'll enter it at this location, and then you'll follow the steps on the screen. Make sure you follow all of them. I had a friend that didn't. He called me like a month later, and it's like, how come I never got my license? I said, well, did you go online and did IACRA and tell me you passed? He's like, no. I said, you have to do that. So you still have to do one more thing. That process doesn't cost money, but make sure you do it. Otherwise, you won't get the card in the mail. As soon as you do it, they'll do that background test. And as soon as they do the background test, you'll get an email, and you'll be able to print a temporary license. So from the time you take the test and pass to the time you get the temporary license can be as little as 3 or 4 days. Okay? But it probably won't be that. It probably won't be any shorter than that. And so if you want to fly commercially, you need to plan at least a week ahead in order to get the proper license. All right, so you might ask, how hard is the exam? Well, it's not too difficult. Like I said, I passed it. I studied for about 15 hours. I've had some friends that said, I just took like 6 hours and read over and I passed. And, I've had some people that say I studied all weekend. I studied over about 2 days for the exam, and I studied about 5 or 6 hours both days. I guess that doesn't add up to 15. But then I studied a little bit like on my way down. All right, so how long is the exam? It has 60 multiple choice questions. I think the recurrent exam only has 40. You have to get a score of 70% or higher. And this is the test that I was talking about. If you you end up taking this test, and it's optional, you don't have to. I know it's $150. If you don't want to take it, you think, hey, I want to try this for a little while before I take it. If you end up taking it, then that's the test that you get out of. Because really, why should you take the test here if you've already taken it? All right, I have a little bit about what it contains on here, but this is a much more comprehensive list. So this is all of the items that are on the exam. Okay? In fact, you know what I should have done? I'm going to do that right now. Is I'm going to move this slide, this other guides to study, up underneath that. What slide was I on? Yeah, what's on the exam? Okay. So we're basically going to focus on airspace today, and we'll discuss a lot of these other rules. We'll get into a little bit of the other rules, but and we've already talked about a lot of the regulations. So the regulations in the airspace is important. And then you need to learn about weather. Okay? A lot of this stuff, though, the weather and effect on small unmanned aircraft performance, something that I found, like I got that in like a introductory geography course. Okay? Now there's a few questions that have to do with actually reading weather print-offs from some machine, and that was a little bit more tricky. But a lot of the just general weather questions seem like I had that knowledge already, or it just took a little bit to brush up. Okay? Small unmanned aircraft loading and performance. There are a few supplements that'll help you with that. Basically, they talk about how heavy an aircraft can be for it to move a certain speed through the air. Emergency procedures, basically what you should do if you see another aircraft. The primary thing there is that you avoid any other aircraft. You descend. That's the right answer most of the time. You see another aircraft, what do? Go higher, go to the left, descend. That was actually a multiple choice question that I got on the test. So the right answer is descend. Okay. So crew resource management, there are some questions that make it sound more like you're flying a commercial airplane. Like, what if somebody's grumpy? Questions like that. We'll get into that later. Also, you shouldn't be on drugs or alcohol. There's questions about how long you can fly after taking a drink, just as if you were a commercial airline pilot. So how long how long it takes to fly an aircraft. That's an important thing. And then there are a few questions about how aircraft operate at an airport that you need to find. So like how they land, if they miss the approach, the pattern that they follow to get back to the airport. And I suppose you need to learn that so that if you are flying in controlled airspace, even with permission of the tower, you understand where the airplanes are going at that particular time. Determine the performance of small unmanned aircraft. Pretty straightforward. And then you need to have a plan to inspect your airplane. They don't actually inspect the airworthiness of this aircraft, but they expect you to. And so you need to have a procedure to do that. And they're kind of liberal on exactly what that procedure is, but they want you to come up with a procedure, and that is tested. Basically your knowledge of knowing that you need to do that. Radio communications procedures, I've seen, one of my questions was just what frequency do most unmanned aerial systems use? And they mostly use the same things as Wi-Fi, and so it's 2.4 gigahertz and 5.8. Anyway, I just got that from studying it. All right. There are a lot of material out there, and I'll try to go over a few other things. There's a lot of resources for studying for these tests. However, these are the two study guides produced by the FAA. That's really, you could just study from these two things. So these two documents, if I click on this, these are the actual rules set up by the FAA. Now, this thing is huge. I didn't read all the way through it. I mean, I guess it's not that long. But it is kind of long. So you could read all the way through it. So, here we talked about, how you should set up. This goes under crew management there. So you got to learn about risk analysis and whether or not something is whether or not a certain risk is acceptable in mitigation, or unsuccessful. They will ask you these types of questions. Now, there's a lot of information in this document, and so they've boiled down a lot of it to be contained in this. This one's called the Remote Pilot Study Guide. This came out just before the test first debuted. So this system actually has only been around now for a little over 2 years. So the first people that pass this test are just now starting to have to take the recurrent exam. So before this, does anybody know what you had to do to fly a UAV? Technically, to do it commercially? You had to actually get a real pilot's license to fly a UAV. So it was kind of onerous, but there were a lot of people that did it, that went out and got a pilot license. Now, there's some of those, you didn't have to have a commercial pilot's license, but you had to be any other type. You could be a sport pilot, which doesn't require as much studying, as much knowledge, and as much flight time. You could even actually be a balloon pilot. You just had to have a pilot's license from the FAA. So anyway, so since 2016, though, we've had this ability to take this test. So this document really walks you through the stuff that you need to learn. So we're going to focus on this. A lot of this, not a lot, but some of this, I just cut and pasted from, that comes up here in a second. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to that, so I'm going to leave that page out. But, there are some general terms here that they use a lot on the tests and on the regulations. And so sometimes they just call an unmanned aircraft a UA. UA is a model aircraft that's capable of flying and is flown within visual line of sight. And model aircraft is flown for just hobby or recreational purposes. I'm not going to read all this to you, but lots of times they'll use the term PIC, or they'll use the acronym PIC. Even on the test, they'll use that term. It's important that you know what that term means, and it stands for pilot in command. In other words, the person that is responsible for the aircraft does not actually technically need the person at the controls, but that person is called the pilot in command, the PIC. So you can be flying, even if you're not licensed, you can be flying commercially if there is a pilot in command that is capable of taking the controls whenever he needs to take them, or he or she. Okay? So the remote pilot in command is you're taking the test so that you can be one of those, the PIC, the pilot in command. Okay? They're the ones that are responsible for the aircraft. They don't necessarily have to be piloting it, but they are responsible for controlling the flight of the UAS under the supervision of the remote pilot in command. So that person has to have a certificate, and they have to pass the exam, obviously, to have that certificate. Now, you'll notice that technically this is called a remote pilot with a small unmanned aircraft rating. What that means is that your aircraft has to be less than 55 pounds. So if it's less than 0.55 pounds, we don't need anything to fly it. And then we can go all the way up to 55 pounds. What's 55 pounds? I used to say like my daughter was 50, now she's probably 90 pounds or something. Pretty light, but you know, that's still pretty heavy. Can you imagine something falling out of the sky that weighed 55 pounds onto a car? It would destroy the car, or at least cause a big dent in it. But if you're going to fly some unmanned system, like the you see on movies, right? The Predator drones that fly over and bomb places or shoot places in war zones. You have to actually be a real pilot. Not a real, when I say real pilot, you have to be you have to have an actual pilot's license to fly one of those. So if it's less than 55, you can have a remote pilot's license. But even if you're flying remotely, you have to have a real pilot's license if it's over 55 pounds. It has to be a small unmanned aircraft. We're not going to get anywhere close to that in ours today. In fact, they're actually thinking, one of the things they're debating is to come up with one where the cutoff would be something like 4 to 8 pounds. That would even require less restrictions. Okay? So that's a debate going around. Okay? So, but if it weighs less than 55 pounds, including everything on board, there's no way that you're ever going to get there. But remember, for the test, that it's not just the aircraft itself; it includes everything on board, and it can be flown without direct human intervention. In other words, you don't have to be on the aircraft. That's what's called a SAUA, an SUA. So what's an SUAS, which is what we've been talking about? Well, that's what the federal government calls all this stuff. So all this stuff together is the unmanned aerial system. So it usually involves the vehicle itself and what's referred to as a ground station. Okay? The ground station allows you to be in contact with the SUS. Now, as part of your flight crew, you're the pilot in command. The flight crew can actually consist of up to 3 different people. Okay? So, well, there can actually be more than one visual observer. You can have 5 or 6 visual observers, but there's 3 different types of people. There's the pilot in command. The pilot in command can actually also be controlling the aircraft itself. But you could have somebody else designated as the person that's actually flying the drone. The pilot in command has to be able to take control whenever he sees that it's a problem. But those can be 2 different people. And then finally, another category of person is a visual observer. Okay? A visual observer is a person acting as a flight crew member who assists the pilot in command and the person manipulating the controls to see and avoid other air traffic or objects aloft or on the ground. So, if you're going to fly and look into the system for a long period of time, you need to have a visual observer, legally, technically. So somebody has to maintain constant contact on the vehicle itself. So if you're going to be flying by looking just at the controls, now you can, it says in the instructions, if you read all the material, you can glance back and forth between the 2. Okay? That's legal, but if you want to fly exclusively, or if you want to put on one of those headsets, then you're supposed to have a visual observer with you to watch the vehicle as you pilot the vehicle with the sticks, or vice versa. Now, so you can have those basically 3 different types of people: people that are piloting, people that are visual observers, and the pilot in command. Pilot in command can act as any of those other ones, but the other ones cannot be the pilot in command unless they are also licensed. And then I believe that there was a question on mine that that had to do with establishing those roles before flying. You can actually change them, but you need to like have a system and say, okay, now you're taking control, vice versa. Okay, so these are some general rules. Like in other words, these are on the test for sure, and these are some of the big rules for Part 107. So, obviously, always avoid manned aircraft. That's what I meant. Typically, the right answer to the questions that say, what should you do if a manned aircraft is approaching? Descend. Descend, descend, descend. I mean, I didn't see a question where it said, what if it's like flying at 200 feet and you're flying above it? It's really hard to tell, trust me because I've done it before, to tell which way a manned aircraft is coming in exactly. The depth perception gets a little messed up, so that's the best advice anyway, is to descend. But that's the right answer on the test. All right, you must keep the drone within sight. Notice that it says this. Alternatively, if you use a first-person view or similar technology, that's what I was trying to get at. You're looking at the thing. You have to have a visual observer to keep your aircraft within unaided sight. So no binoculars. Now, the visual observer can have binoculars with him, but he has to be able to observe it without those binoculars. You should say close enough. He doesn't. Okay? All right, neither you nor your visual observer can be responsible for more than one unmanned aircraft operation at a time. Okay? So you fly one airplane, and that test is, I mean, that question is actually on there. You know, can your visual observer be flying another aircraft? Usually it's a multiple choice, so it wouldn't be worded quite like that. I'll get to some actual example questions here in a little while. Okay. You can fly during daylight. This is one that's different than flying recreationally. Flying recreationally never mentions anything about daylight. However, the Part 107 rules, in other words, if you're flying commercially, you can only fly between the 30 minutes before official sunrise to 30 minutes after official sunset. They call that civil twilight. And if you do fly there, you have to have lights on your aircraft. Almost all these vehicles nowadays have lights on them. But so that is something that you can't do. You cannot fly commercially. That'll be on the test too, I'm sure. When I say that'll be on the test questions are like randomized, so sometimes they're not. Okay, but that's a big one. So you can't fly at night, basically. All right. You have to know a little bit about weather. Minimum weather visibility is 3 miles from your control station. So in other words, there's no way. What they're telling you is that that if the visibility is less than 3 miles, then you need to fly a lot closer. The maximum altitude is 400 feet above ground level, or within 400 feet of a structure. This is interesting. You actually can't go faster than 100 miles per hour with your drone. Most of these drones won't go faster than 100 miles per hour. I can see how you could design one, especially if you had 55 pounds to deal with. All right, right now, you can't fly UAS over anyone not directly participating. This is the rule that they're thinking of making a little bit more flexible for very light SUAS vehicles. Okay? So when I said they're thinking to come up with another category, it would be a little bit more lenient to flying over some people, like not a crowded area, but but right now, the way the rule is written is you cannot fly over anyone not directly participating in the operation, not under a covered structure or inside of a covered stationary vehicle. So sometimes I've interpreted this, not sometimes I, but others have interpreted this as it's perfectly fine to fly over a roadway where everybody is inside of a car because they're inside of a covered structure. And there are examples on the test where they'll ask questions like that. If I fly over somebody in a vehicle, is that okay? Of course, the question will be a little bit different. But yes, that's okay. They're inside of a covered structure or a covered stationary vehicle.
Or they only do cameras like?
There are ones that have microphones. Most of these consumer or even the prosumer ones don't have a microphone on them because all you hear is. Yeah, you wouldn't hear anything else. So no, most of them don't. Now some people, probably not a test question about this, but some people have interpreted not directly participating in the operation to mean that if you go ahead and notify, it wouldn't be practical at a concert. If you go ahead and you notify, and those people say they give you their express permission. So let's say we're at a golf course, and we could notify all 10 people that were out there. And we could walk up to them and say, we're going to fly a drone over. You can either leave, or if you are fine with us taking your picture and you being involved in this operation, that you could be, if they say, yes, I consent, then those people would be participating in the operation. But if they just work for the same company as you, there are questions about that. Like, let's say they work for the same company or they work for the company that's paying you. Technically, unless they've been notified and are agreeing, they are not directly participating in the operation. They're just other employees. And so that's a type of question that would appear on the test. I might give you a scenario like that. Say you're working for a mining company and you're flying over, over the pit mine, and there's other employees working in the area. What would be wrong with this scenario? A, B, C. You choose the one where you say there's people down there, and unless they've been notified, they're not participating. Also, you can't operate from a moving vehicle unless you're flying over a sparsely populated area. Now, we already said you can't. I don't know why this rule is written the way it is. You're not allowed to technically fly over people, but what they're probably saying there is that you cannot fly from a moving vehicle unless you're in an area where you would normally not expect to see anybody. I've done that before. It's kind of fun, like a boat. All right. You can carry an external load. We're actually going to mount on these vehicles. I'm going to get a near-infrared camera. We're going to mount that near-infrared. Actually, we mount it up here. Near-infrared camera on these vehicles later in the semester. And so the Part 107 rules talk specifically about this. And so there'll be questions. Do you need to securely attach it? And it does not adversely affect the flight characteristics. So you're a little bit of the judge of that. But we experimented a few times. We tried to put 2 cameras on one of these larger drones that we had called the 3DR Solo. Tried to put 2 of those digital SLR cameras, and it flew okay. It was like going like this at the end of every thing. But then when it landed, it was coming down, and all of a sudden we said, "Oh, it's coming down fast!" And it bam, and it bounced off the ground. I mean, it was still flying, but not very well. So that would definitely be. We were way out in the middle of the desert. This is an experiment. But that would definitely be an example of it adversely affecting the flight characteristics and controllability of the aircraft. It also was like a $200 or $300 mistake because it broke the lens. It didn't actually break the camera, thank goodness. But it broke the lens, the camera lens, which I guess it was about $250. All right. So there will be some questions about being able to, or there often are. There were some questions when I took it about transporting property for compensation. You might think, is it legal to, like, let's say I own, this was actually on my test. Let's say you own a business that will transport sleeping bags up to people in an area where they're camping by drone. Would this be legal? Or under what conditions will this be legal? And it had a few examples. I think one of the examples was that you were going to fly over the trail, so obviously you had to say something. One of the questions you had to say no because you're flying over people. Another one was that they give you the weight of the sleeping bag and the weight of the drone itself, and you had to make sure that they were less than 55 pounds. So you can carry payload. Okay? That's written in part 107. All right, you can request a waiver of most restrictions if you can show that the operation will provide a level of safety at least equivalent to the restriction from which you want the waiver. So here are the more general Part 107 rules. Like I said, they don't come out and inspect your aircraft, but you need to have a pre-flight inspection that includes checking the communication link between the control station and the UAS. So I've had people that I've seen people get these things out. On these drones, you press the sticks down to take off. They set it up, and as soon as the light turns green, they press the button down, they take off, and then they're still hooking up their other things. That's not the way that the FAA wants you to operate. And so you need to establish a pre-flight inspection routine. Okay? And so there'll be questions that say, do you need to have a pre-flight inspection routine, or what elements should you include in your pre-flight inspection routine? And so that's part of the rule. So if you're acting as a pilot in command, they don't inspect it, but you do have to make it available if they ask for it. Okay? And it's good to keep records of how often each battery flies. I actually have an app that exists on my devices, so that when it lands, it records, and it actually reads the serial number and records how long that particular battery flew for. Because batteries wear out, other components wear out, so it's nice to know how long your aircraft has flown for. I don't think I can look at it on the computer, but maybe I'll see if I can and do it next week or next time we meet. All right. Now it's a little different with Part 107. You don't register every vehicle once. You don't register yourself once and attach the same number to every vehicle. If you're flying commercially, each drone has to register independent. As long as they weigh under 55 pounds, you register them. You register them online at the same place, actually. Whether you're flying commercially or recreationally, you register at the same place. This is a screenshot of that. I'll make this big. So this is a screenshot. I have 5 UASs, which are the other 4 here. Actually, I have a few more now. I probably need to go register them if I'm going to fly them commercially. But we have the 3 Phantoms and a Mavic, and 2 now. We have 2 fixed-wing Parrot Discos. So I need to register one of those. I probably didn't register the other one yet. So if you hit Manage USA Inventory, it just shows you all of them. It shows the serial number that you've said, and then it gives you the number that you have. It generates that number for you that you can stick on to the aircraft itself. So you have 5 active. They still last for 3 years. You have to renew them, but they're only $5 each. It's not an onerous cost, just like the other one. $5. Also, you can actually, I don't know why you do this, but you can have multiple users on one account think every user should have their own account. But let's say, I was running a business, so I could have multiple licenses attached. And so these could be associated with multiple certificate holders there. Okay, now this didn't exist even like a year ago. This is new. So you can actually request a waiver for any of those rules that we just went over, those general rules. You can request a waiver right here, right in the app. You used to have to send it was still by email, but you used to actually send a document in to get it approved. Okay? So that's how you do a waiver. You can also do airspace authorizations here. Waivers waivers are attempting to ask for an exception to a rule, and authorization is attempting to access an exception to an airspace violation. So waivers and authorizations. So the waiver system works really well, all online, automated. Authorizations are still kind of piecemeal. Like for example, when I pulled up AirMap, if I would have gone in a little bit further, you'll see that that one doesn't do electronic authorizations yet. You have to actually call the tower and tell them, hey, I'm going to fly. Is that okay? Can I fly near the airport at this time? And they'll tell you yes or no. All right. Actually, I don't think Hattiesburg even has a tower.
Before you fly, warning me about the hospital.
Yes. So right here, you'll have the hospital, which didn't show up on our map. So that's a little bit. Helipads. Now, if you were flying commercially, you're still considered to be in uncontrolled airspace, and so you could fly, but you'd have to yield. If you heard a helicopter, you'd have to land immediately. But the recreational rules technically say you shouldn't even fly near those places. Okay, now if you do get in an accident, look at these are actually also. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week, but these are actually also on the test. When do you need to report if you have an accident? Right? Okay. So this actually tells you the remote piloting command must report an accident to the FAA no later than 10 days. You got to know that after a Part 107 operation that met the following criteria. In other words, if you just crash your your UAS into an open field with nobody there, and it doesn't hurt anybody, you don't have to because it doesn't meet any of these criteria. Let's look at the criteria. Serious injury to any person or any loss of consciousness. That's one. Okay. What is serious injury? So if you read the guidelines, and the test will talk about this, is it's any injury that caused the person to seek professional medical attention. So then you have to report that. They had to seek professional medical attention. So damage to any property other than the small unmanned aircraft, unless one of the following conditions is satisfied. The cost of the repair, including materials, labor, does not exceed $500. So in other words, if you crashed into something that's valued less than $500, what's that? Yeah, a mailbox or something like that, then you don't have to. Or the fair market value of the property does not exceed $500 in the event of total loss. So in other words, if the damage is less than $500, you don't have to file a report. Obviously, if you destroyed something, even if it's $450, it's still your fault. You still have to pay for it. You just have to file a report about it. Okay? So those are the restrictions. You can file the report right online. You used to not be able to do that even a year ago. Okay, so there'll be, there's test questions about that. All right, let's talk a little bit about airspace, and then I'll get into a few examples. So a lot of this I just took from this section here. So I mean, I could just, might be more, this actually contains a bit more text, but maybe, oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, actually, I'm just going to get out of here.